In the oldest and most mysterious deck of symbols ever to survive the passage of time, there is a card that shows a naked figure kneeling beside still waters, pouring from two vessels, one into the pool, one onto the earth, while above her head burns a single great star surrounded by 7 smaller ones. The figure is unclothed, unashamed, unconditioned. She pours out endlessly, and the waters do not diminish. She is the star. And in 1948, in a modest room in New York City, a man named Neville Goddard stood before a small gathering and said something that has haunted every serious student of his work since. Eden is not a place you left behind. Eden is a state of consciousness, the natural state of man before he learned to judge, to divide, to assume limitation. And you are returning to it now, whether you know it or not. What if these two images, separated by centuries, by culture, by the gulf between the mystical and the scriptural, are describing the exact same return? What if the soul's journey back to innocence, back to the garden, back to the place where imagination and reality have not yet split apart, has been mapped by every tradition that ever dared to look within? Tonight, we begin that journey. And we begin it where all true journeys begin, at the moment just before the fall, when consciousness still knew itself as whole. Welcome to Neville Goddard Universe, a channel devoted to the truth that Neville Goddard did not invent a system. He recovered one. He remembered one. And in remembering it, he gave voice to what the mystics, the Kabbalists, the alchemists, and the awakened souls of every age have always known, that consciousness is the only reality, that imagination is the divine creative power, and that you, yes, you, are the operant power in your own experience. In this episode, we are beginning a multi-part series called Return to Eden. And in this first part, we are going to explore one of the most luminous and profound symbols in the Western esoteric tradition, the star card of the tarot, and see how it maps perfectly onto Neville's earliest and most radical teaching about Eden, not as a myth of the past, but as a prophecy of your return. We are going to look at what Neville meant when he said that Eden was the state of being before assumption, before the fall into judgment and division. We are going to explore how the naked figure in the star, pouring water without effort or thought, symbolizes what Neville called the natural man, unconditioned consciousness, pure awareness before it learned to clothe itself in limitation. And we are going to trace the Kabbalistic path of the star, the Hebrew-lettered Zadi, and see how it leads directly to the same gate Neville pointed us toward, the return to innocence, the recovery of imagination as the seat of reality itself. This is not a surface-level comparison. This is a recognition. And if you have ever felt that Neville's teaching was pointing you toward something older, something universal, something that predates every scripture and outlasts every culture, then this episode is for you. And if this exploration speaks to you, if it stirs something you've been trying to name, then I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's a small gesture, but it tells me you're here for the deeper work, and it helps this work find others who are ready for it. Thank you for being here. Let us begin with Neville. In his 1948 lectures, some of the earliest recordings we have of him teaching publicly, Neville spoke often of Eden, not as a garden in ancient Mesopotamia, not as a historical event that happened to a man named Adam and a woman named Eve, but as a state of consciousness, the natural state of man before he learned to assume anything other than his own divinity. Listen to how Neville describes it. He says, Eden is the state of consciousness in which man dwells before he eats of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It is the state where imagination and reality are one, where there is no division between the thinker and the thought, the desirer and the desired. In Eden, you do not try to create. You simply are-s, and the world reflects you perfectly, because the world is yourself pushed out. This is the key. Eden, for Neville, is not innocence in the sense of naivety. It is innocence in the sense of wholeness. It is the consciousness that has not yet divided itself into subject and object, self and other, inner and outer. It is the state in which you know, Not believe, but know, that your imagination is the creative power, and that there is no secondary cause, no external force, no condition that can act upon you without your consent. Neville tells us that we fell from Eden the moment we began to assume limitations. The moment we said, I am poor, I am sick, I am unworthy, I am separate from what I desire. In that moment, we ate the fruit. We divided reality. We created the illusion of a gap between consciousness and its manifestation. And we have been living in that illusion ever since. But here is the prophecy hidden in every one of Neville's lectures. You are returning to Eden. Not someday, not after death. Not when the world is ready. Now. The return is happening now. In you. As you awaken to the truth that your assumptions create your reality. That your imagination is God. That there is no power outside of you. Let me make this concrete. Imagine a woman who has spent years believing she is unloved. She has evidence for this belief. Relationships that ended, affection that was withheld, words that were never spoken. And because she assumes she is unloved, she moves through the world wearing that assumption like a cloak. She interprets every glance, every silence, every interaction through the lens of that belief. And the world, being yourself pushed out, confirms it. Not because it is true, but because she has assumed it. Now imagine that same woman discovering Neville's teaching. She learns that her assumption, I am unloved, is not a fact about reality. It is a fact about her state of consciousness. It is the fruit she has been eating. And she learns that she can stop eating it. She can assume the opposite. She can enter into the feeling of being loved, being cherished, being seen. Not because anything external has changed, but because she has changed the state from which she is looking. And as she does this, as she persists in the assumption, I am loved, until it becomes natural to her, until it feels like the truth, the world begins to rearrange itself. People who once seemed distant become warm. Opportunities for connection appear. The very quality of her days shifts, not because she manipulated anything, but because she returned to the state of Eden, the state where imagination and reality are one, where consciousness is the only cause. This is what Neville meant when he said, the world is a mirror, forever reflecting what you are doing within yourself. In Eden, you know this. Outside of Eden, you forget it. And the entire spiritual journey, the only journey there is the remembering. Neville goes further. He says that in Eden, you do not labor, you do not struggle, you do not force or manipulate or chase, you pour out. You give from the overflow of your own awareness. You imagine, and the imagining becomes fact, because there is no resistance, no doubt, no division between the one who imagines and the reality that responds. This is the natural man. The man. And we are speaking here of consciousness, not gender, who has not yet learned to judge himself as separate from his desire. The one who assumes his good as naturally as he assumes his own existence. This is the state Neville is calling you back to. Not as a distant ideal, but as your birthright, your true nature, the home you never truly left. And now that we have established this with Neville, let us turn to the star. The star card appears in the tarot as the 17th card of the major arcana. And if you know the structure of the tarot, you know that it comes immediately after the tower, the card of collapse, of the shattering of false structures, of the moment when everything you thought was solid turns out to be built on sand. And then, after the fall, after the ruin, after the illusions have been stripped away, there is the star. The figure on the card is naked. She kneels beside a pool of water, 1 foot on the land, 1 foot in the water. In her hands are 2 vessels, and she pours from both, one into the pool, one onto the earth. Above her head is a single great star, often shown as 8-pointed, and around it are 7 smaller stars. In some decks, a bird, often an ibis, the sacred bird of Thoth, sits on a tree in the background, watching. This is not an image of arrival. This is an image of return. The nakedness is not vulnerability, it is unconditioned being. The pouring is not loss, it is overflow. The star above is not external guidance. It is the recognition of the light within her, shining without obstruction. The star is the soul that has passed through the collapse of the ego, the shattering of false identity, and now stands, or kneels, in the presence of its own true nature. It is consciousness that has remembered. It is the source, not the receiver. It is the return to Eden. Now, let us go deeper. In Kabbalistic tarot, the tradition that assigns each of the 22 major arcana cards to one of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet and to the paths on the tree of life. The star corresponds to the Hebrew letter Sadika, and Zadi means fishhook, the instrument that draws something up from the depths, that pulls the hidden into the visible, that makes manifest what was submerged. The path of Zadi on the tree of life connects Netzach, the sphere of desire, emotion, and the longing for union, to Yesod, the sphere of foundation, the subconscious mind, the realm where images form before they solidify into experience. In other words, the star is the path by which desire becomes imagination, and imagination becomes form. Do you hear the echo? Neville said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled." The star says, "Kneel in the presence of your own imaginal power, and pour it out into the world without fear or withholding." Neville said, "Consciousness is the only reality." The star says, "The light is within you. The vessels are in your hands. You are not waiting for grace to descend. You are the one pouring it." Let us look at the symbolism more closely. The naked figure in the star is often described in tarot literature as representing hope, healing, and renewal. But these are only the surface meanings. The deeper truth is this: she is naked because she has nothing left to defend. She has no persona, no mask, no assumed identity to protect. She is consciousness in its natural state, what Neville called the natural man, the man who has not yet learned to clothe himself in the garment of limitation. Paul, in his letters, speaks of putting off the old man and putting on the new. Neville took this further and said, "You are always wearing a state. Every assumption you make is a garment, and you can take it off." The star shows you what remains when all garments are removed: pure awareness, pouring itself into form. The two vessels she holds are often interpreted as the conscious and subconscious mind, or as the union of opposites, the merging of above and below, inner and outer. But in Neville's framework, we can see them more precisely. One vessel pours into the pool, the return of consciousness to its own source, the act of going within. The other pours onto the earth, the manifestation of that inner state into external reality. She is doing both at once, effortlessly, because she knows they are not separate acts. To imagine is to create. To feel is to manifest. There is no gap. The star above her head, the great light surrounded by 7 smaller lights, is a precise mystical symbol. 8 is the number of resurrection, of the new beginning, of the octave that transcends the cycle of 7. 7 is the number of completion in the natural world. 7 days, 7 planets of the ancients, 7 chakras, 7 seals. But 8 is the number that breaks the cycle and enters a new dimension. It is the consciousness that has completed its journey through limitation and returned to itself, but now aware of what it is. Neville spoke of this in his later lectures when he described the mystical experiences of the Promised Land, the resurrection, the birth from above. He said, "You will know you are awake when you experience yourself as the being you always were, but now consciously. The star is that awakening. It is not the innocence of the child who has never fallen. It is the innocence of the one who has fallen, descended, suffered, and returned, and in returning has integrated the entire journey." In the Hermetic tradition, there is a phrase, "As above, so below, as within, so without." The star embodies this perfectly. The figure does not look up to the stars for salvation. She is the star. The light is not coming from outside. It is radiating from her own consciousness, reflected in the heavens above and the waters below. And this is exactly what Neville taught. He said, "The whole vast world is no more than your consciousness pushed out. What you are conscious of being, you are, and the world must reflect it." The star, kneeling in perfect stillness, pouring out without effort, is the consciousness that has stopped resisting this truth. She has stopped trying to change the outer world. She has returned to the inner garden, the place where imagination reigns, and she pours from that infinite source. Now, here is where the traditions converge with breathtaking precision. Neville said that Eden is the state of consciousness before assumption, before you began to define yourself as limited, separate, lacking. The star, in the tarot, is the first moment of peace and clarity after the tower has destroyed all your false assumptions. It is the state you enter when the world you built on sand has collapsed, and you are left with nothing but your own awareness. And you realize that is enough. That is everything. The nakedness, the pouring, the stillness. These are not symbols of passivity. They are symbols of power regained. The power you had in Eden, before you believed you needed to strive, to earn, to prove. The power of the natural man, who assumes his good as effortlessly as he assumes his own existence. And so we can say it plainly. The star is the soul's return to Eden. It is the restoration of imagination as the seat of reality. It is the recovery of innocence, not as ignorance, but as wholeness. And it is the prophecy Neville spoke over every one of us, that we are returning, right now, to the state where consciousness and creation are one. Now let us bring this into practice. Because Neville's teaching was never abstract, and neither is the star. Both are invitations to do something, to enter into a state, to assume a truth, to pour out from the vessels in your own hands. The practice I want to offer you tonight is what I call unconditioned imagining, and it is drawn directly from Neville's core method, but framed through the lens of the star's symbolism. Here is the practice, step by step. First, choose a desire, not a vague wish, but a specific state of being you want to assume. Perhaps it is the feeling of being financially secure. Perhaps it is the feeling of being loved, being seen, being recognized in your work. Perhaps it is the feeling of perfect health, or deep peace, or creative flow. Name it clearly. What state of consciousness do you want to inhabit? Second, sit quietly, close your eyes, and begin to strip away everything that is not that state. This is the nakedness of the star. You are not bringing your current conditions into the meditation. You are not bringing your doubt, your history, your reasons why it hasn't happened yet. You are laying all of that down. You are becoming unconditioned consciousness. Awareness without defense, without armor, without story. Neville called this entering the silence. The star calls it kneeling beside still water. The words are different. The practice is the same. You are returning to the place where imagination is free to move without resistance. Third, construct a simple scene, a single image or moment, that implies your desire is already fulfilled. Neville was insistent on this. Do not imagine the process of getting what you want. Imagine the result. Imagine the end. The end. If you desire financial security, do not imagine yourself working harder or receiving a check. Imagine yourself in the state where money is no longer a concern. Perhaps you see yourself looking at a bank statement with calm satisfaction. Perhaps you hear a friend congratulate you on your success. Perhaps you feel the texture of a key in your hand, the key to the home you now own. Make it sensory, make it specific. And here is where the star teaches us something Neville also knew. Pour it out without withholding. Do not ration your imagination. Do not hold back the feeling because you are afraid it is not real yet. The figure in the star does not check the level of water in her vessels before she pours. She pours freely, knowing the source is infinite. So give yourself to the scene. Feel it fully. Let the feeling of the wish fulfilled saturate you. Let it be as real in your imagination as anything you have ever touched in the physical world. Because, as Neville said, the only difference between an imagined state and a so-called real state is in the degree of vividness. Intensify the imaginal act, and it becomes fact. Fourth, repeat this scene night after night until it becomes natural to you, until you no longer have to convince yourself it is true, until it simply feels like the truth. Neville called this persistence. The star calls it pouring endlessly into the pool and onto the earth, the continuous return to the inner source until the outer world reorganizes itself to reflect it. And here is the final step. Release it. Do not chase it in the outer world. Do not manipulate, force, or scheme. The star does not look up anxiously at the heavens, wondering if her pouring will work. She knows. She is still. She has returned to Eden, the state where consciousness and creation are one, and she rests in that certainty. Walk through your day as the one who has already received, not as an act, but as a state. When you think of your desire, feel the satisfaction of its fulfillment. When doubt arises, return to the scene, return to the stillness, return to the garden. This is the practice of unconditioned imagining, and it is the practice of the star, and it is the practice Neville gave us, spoken in different words but pointing to the same gate. Try it tonight. Before you sleep, enter the silence, strip away every condition, and imagine the end. Imagine yourself in the state you long for, and pour that feeling out into your subconscious as freely as water poured into a pool. And then trust. Trust that consciousness is the only reality. Trust that the world is yourself pushed out. Trust that you are returning to Eden, one assumption at a time. Let us step back now and ask the larger question, why does this convergence matter? Why should it move us that Neville, speaking in mid-20th century New York, and the creators of the tarot, working centuries earlier in the mystery schools of Europe, and the Kabbalists, tracing paths on the tree of life in medieval Spain and Safed, all arrived at the same truth? Because it tells us something about the nature of consciousness itself. These traditions did not borrow from one another. They did not read each other's notes. And yet they mapped the same journey, the fall from wholeness, the descent into division, and the return to the state where imagination and reality are one. They use different symbols: the garden, the star, the path of Zadi, the still waters, but they are describing the same homecoming. And this suggests something profound, that the structure of consciousness is not arbitrary, that there are certain truths embedded so deeply in the fabric of awareness that anyone who looks within long enough, with enough honesty, will find them. That the journey back to Eden is not a myth invented by one culture or one prophet. It is the journey every soul makes when it awakens from the dream of separation. Neville knew this. He read widely, deeply. He studied the mystics, the Kabbalists, the alchemists. But he always returned to his central insight, that all of these systems are describing one thing: the creative power of imagination, the truth that consciousness is the only reality, the fact that you are the operant power in your own world. The star card, in this light, is not just a piece of esoteric symbolism. It is a mirror. It is showing you what you look like when you have stopped defending, stopped striving, stopped assuming limitation. It is showing you what you look like when you have returned to the garden, to the state where you know, not believe, but know, that you are the light, the source, the one who pours reality into form. And this convergence, between Neville and the tarot, between scripture and Kabbalah, between the ancient paths and the modern revelation, this convergence is not an accident. It is a confirmation. It is the universe saying, yes, this is the way. This is the truth. And it has always been the truth, waiting for you to remember it. And so we return to the title of this episode, Return to Eden. You are not trying to reach a place you have never been. You are remembering a state you have always carried within you. The garden is not behind you. It is beneath you, within you, waiting for you to kneel beside its still waters and pour out what you have been holding back. The star is not a distant symbol. It is your own consciousness, unconditioned, unashamed, aware of its own creative power. And the path of return is not long. It is as close as your next assumption, your next imaginal act, your next moment of stillness in which you choose to assume the truth of what you desire rather than the appearance of what you see. If this exploration has stirred something in you, if it has helped you see Neville's teaching through a new lens or deepened your sense of the great unity beneath all mystical paths, then I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this work reach others who are ready for it, and I am grateful for every mind that walks this path with us. Neville said that Eden is the state of being before assumption, and that you are returning to it now. The star shows you what that return looks like, naked, undefended, pouring out endlessly from an infinite source. And the convergence of these two truths, one spoken, one drawn, tells you that this is not theory. This is the shape of your own soul, seen clearly. You are the light above and the water below. You are the one who pours. You are the garden and the gardener, the star, and the one who kneels beneath it. And the world you see is not something happening to you. It is something flowing from you, endlessly, as naturally as water poured from a vessel. Tonight, before you sleep, try this. Imagine yourself in the state you long for, and let that imagining be as free and full as the pouring of the star. Do not ration it. Do not question it. Simply pour it out, into the silence, into the subconscious, into the still pool of your own awareness. And trust that what you pour within will rise, in its own time, as fact in your world. You are not far from Eden. You never were. You are standing at its gate now, and the gate is your own imagination, and it has never been closed.